It's Alexia from TechCrunch. I'm here with Jameson Detweiler of LaunchRock, and we are at the closing end of 7 interviews of the most interesting startups at 500 Startups. There's plenty of interesting ones. I mean, you just brought up Tinfoil as one that's going to kill it. I'll be sure to mention them. They're a security startup that finds issues.
Yeah, they're focused on sort of really inexpensive but simple and straightforward ways to help identify insecurities in websites from small businesses to startups to big companies.
So, but didn't interview them. But I think the reason I didn't is because I was more interested in the more the more consumer facing things that'll scale, that are like kind of juicy.
Yeah.
And LaunchRock is like the meta example of I would much rather, I know that an investor will look at Tinfoil and salivate, whereas LaunchRock, it's like, okay, what does this do?
Yeah.
So, but I personally think that the story of tech is a story of scale, and you've managed to be one of the few things out there that makes that your business.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me why you think LaunchRock is one of the 7 most interesting.
Yeah, I think that I think that the problem that we're working on is about distribution, and that's obviously very interesting to people. And if we can solve that and understand what it takes to really get great distribution in a product, find out the formula behind that, then that's a problem that everybody's facing, and I think that becomes very interesting. I also think that
the reason I didn't pick Tinfoil is they're not flashy. How are they going?
Well, except for the Tinfoil thing.
It's ironic that they're not flashy.
Yeah.
So I mean, you said that you had a startup before this one and it failed because you couldn't get users. Mm-hmm. What do you think the problem is? And
yeah, I mean, I think that you find that the most successful companies find ways to get their existing users to distribute, to help them with distribution by getting their friends to come in. You look at companies like Facebook who have done it. Actually, the biggest success with Facebook was they had email address book importers that invited friends to come in and look at their photos. So Facebook invites via email actually say, hey, come check out my photos on Facebook. They don't really tell you what Facebook is. And it's finding those compelling things to share.
So what's LaunchRock?
What is LaunchRock?
Yes.
So we basically help people get users. We get
in what
users.
ways? How?
Yeah. So today we have a very simple landing page widget and API that makes it easy for you to sign up people for your product as it's launching, and then incentivize them to share it with their friends currently through Facebook, Twitter, and email, and now we're adding in Tumblr and LinkedIn as well as Google+.
So who's the closest to what you do, and how do you differentiate yourselves?
Sure. So it depends on how you kind of slice it and dice it, but some people think that on balance is if they look at us as a landing page company, and I don't like to think of us as a landing page company. I like to think of us as the things that we do around the tracking and the back-end analytics. And
that's how you make money, right?
Yeah, that's how we are making money and sort of where we're going in. We also have a lot of brands and media companies that are very interested, and we're building additional tools that go beyond the launch process as well. That will scale with.
You said that you've signed up 50 Cent today. Like, what brands and media companies are you? 50 Cent's going to sell like orange juice.
It's a product in the food and beverage space. I can't say specifically what it is, but yeah. So there's doing that. We did.
Is it an energy drink?
Possibly. I don't know. So
yeah, you do.
But we did a T-shirt line
Hard-hitting question
for the Olsen twins as well. Okay. So there's a company called Beachmint that does shoe-dazzle style partnerships with celebrities, and so we help them launch their brands with the Olsen twins. And then we have all sorts of inbound things that just kind of come on the platform without. We really just referred. So we did a dance music magazine, a private airline, Plain Red. Musicians are using it, and so we're finding also a lot of interest from sort of the Hollywood scene as well, media companies. So there's a lot of things that make sense for them, and I think that's part of what makes us interesting is we're our own distribution mechanism, and we help people scale, and we scale too. So it's very easy for us to reach these large scales very quickly.
Well, I mean, do you think that the viral launch model might get old? It might be just like a symptom of our bubble, right? How many people? I mean, if there's a crash, how many people are really going to need to massively acquire users in a short
Yeah.
period of time.
So for us, yeah, I mean, there is a very, very large number of startups that are currently using us, but we're also, again, seeing this in the media space and things like that. And so there's always people who need to build large audiences online. So for us, there's always a mechanism there. We're also looking at a lot of things right now that go beyond sort of this traditional viral mechanism. We've learned a lot about sharing and distribution, and the thing that we're seeing is that there's increasingly a lot of noise online. All these share buttons and all these networks are really making it easy for you to put a lot of crap in front of your friends. And we're trying to find ways to do more targeted distribution so that you can share interesting things with your friends who actually care about those things, as opposed to sharing it with everybody. We know from what we've seen that that's actually going to be a much more effective distribution technique, and so we're working on stuff there now, sort of an evolution and moving away from the more traditional techniques, which are getting tired and old. They are starting to wear out.
Yeah, of course.
The techniques that we have today are working. They're working very, very well. But you'll find that like email address book importing, which is a feature that we do have, is actually not nearly as effective as most people probably think that it is, because people just do not respond to these email invites, and they often get reported as spam. We're about to actually revamp the way that works on our site. But actually, the interesting thing is if you go to places like India or Brazil, those techniques work extraordinarily well right now. I know somebody is doing an Indian dating site, and he actually has to hold back some of those invites because it's really working really well. It's a cultural thing. Like, we have these cultural shifts online. And I find that that's absolutely fascinating that we see that. But these things do change over time.
What is the premium features of LaunchRock, and how much do you charge for them?
So there's a couple things that we're going to be doing. We're working, there's some sort of more white label things with these bigger brands, media companies. There's also, agencies really want the ability to manage multiple pages. And then we're also building back-end tools around continued engagement. So we're doing things around, what do you do with that list after you have it? How do you keep it warm? And then again, we're expanding now into and beyond the launch process. And so it's sort of a SaaS freemium model. So we actually, the page, for the most part, if you're like a company that needs like a single page and you want to use it, and that's all that you want to use it for, we want to keep that free. We think that our value is more on the things that we do behind the scenes and after that's happened. So.
Yeah, so you launched yourself with your page.
Yes. Yeah.
And today you can actually go to the page and find other things, whereas before it was just a page, correct?
Yeah, so now we have a little more information there about what we're doing and showing off the product a little bit. And so as we're getting ready now to open up and come out of
What is
beta.
investor reaction to when you pitch? Do they just stare at you blankly? Try to do the infinity symbol with what you do?
No, it just depends. Like, some people really get it, and other people just think that we're building a feature. And on the surface, there's elements I think that it does look like it's a feature of what we do. The things that we're doing and where we're going, the people who get it absolutely love it. And then there's people who just have no idea, won't even take a meeting actually because all that they see is that they keep running into these pages on startups, and so that's cool, and so they assume that we only do this one thing. But it depends. When we get to sit down and tell the story to people, people actually really respond very well.
So what you do differently is data. So you're like a big data play?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is help you take that data of your users that are coming together and that social data and that referral system that happens. So what I know is we generate these links for users to share. And what we can actually do is build out that graph of how that distributed. And so we see these referral chains of over 20 people in some of these sites. And so we've got that data there, and so we can say, hey, this person actually brought in 30, 40, 100, 1,000 people, and then give you that. And then we're now making it so you can actually use that information and slice it and then sort of move people into these different segments. And again, it gives you more understanding of how interested people are, how engaged they are, and sort of do you need to pay special attention to them.
So kind of pyramid scheme type?
No, it's the same thing. You're always you
should pay attention to the one
buttons.
person, to Kevin Rose. Kevin Rose brings in thousands of people, so he should get more attention from a brand.
Yeah, so there's elements there of that, but there's also the people who are in the middle who are extraordinarily valuable as well. There are 80% of the people have 5 friends who are going to come. And ultimately, that's going to add up to more than like the Kevin Roses at the top. They're very valuable, and you want to make sure that you're paying attention to them. But we're helping you. Again, like the things that we're working on now are about how do you find ways to engage everybody up and down the value chain, all the way down to the bottom, where there are people who, like, this is again beyond the launch process, but you might have people who are not particularly engaged. Let's call them at risk. Like, what do you do to get those people to come back, and what do you do to actually make them happy?
How do you get them to come back?
So there's a number of different things that you can do, but there's, I mean, even basic things of like just asking them like, what do we do? Why are we here? Why aren't you here anymore? And so we're working on features around that as well. That'll be coming out. But some of these things are further down the line than others.
So how would color get people back? Like, what would LaunchRock do for color?
For color right now. What would LaunchRock do for color? I think that like color fundamentally just needs to sit there. Like, I think that we haven't heard the last from them. Like, it's very interesting, very sharp people. That I think that there was like something in what they were doing that was very interesting. But I think they need to come out and say, hey, we're starting something different, and I think if they wanted to use LaunchRock today, they could. And like, they have so much media attention. People are going to want to sign up just to see what's next, coming out of them, just to see if they fumble hugely again. So, but we'll see. The other problem with color, though, and the one thing, the risk that they ran is they put together this huge launch campaign, this massive launch campaign. They put a lot of effort into it. And I think it did backfire to a certain extent.
You think if they just set up a LaunchRock page, no PR.
It made sense, but there is something to be said for rolling out to your users over time to learn. Like Quora has done this like really effectively most like recently. I think they're probably the most recent example of a company that did that really effectively to build a really engaged community, learn, iterate, and bring them in, and then now they're really in a more open system. And Turntable too is obviously doing that as well. There's good things. The artificial scarcity helps too. It's definitely effective, and that will always be effective. I mean, people always want to feel like they're part of something and that they're first ones in. And like, I think it'd be interesting to look at like the big social services over the last decade. I bet you that the first 10,000 people would be very close across all of those.
I mean, Instagram, I feel like when it was bourbon, it was like very few users, and then it started virality. Like, I think MG was like user number 2 or something, and it started rolling out really slowly.
Yeah, I mean, well, they harnessed on Twitter, I think, and helped that. That definitely helped. But yeah, I think that's one use case I'm actually not as familiar with.
Yeah, I don't think I'm saying it correctly or as familiar as I'd like to be. But I know that it's not something like color, which was just unleashed on the masses and not like kind of eased in.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You have to dip your toe.
Exactly. I mean, there's so many photo sharing apps, and what it is. I don't know if anybody actually really knows what it is about Instagram.
It's like a slow. It feels like a slow growth. It's like they're not concerned so much with scale. Like, every time I try to get numbers out of them, they wouldn't say, and then say we don't really care about scale. It's more about like engagement.
Yeah, I mean, it goes ultimately over the long term. Like, that's what's valuable for these long-term user, like the long-term user engagement. If these people are, because you can get users. This is the problem with virality, by the way, is that you can get your K factor up, like the rate at which one person brings in other people. But oftentimes the downside of that is that you actually have people who drop off because of that. And so you can grow really quickly, but you shed users at a rate that's also a problem. And you can do that for a certain amount of time, but at a certain point that's going to catch up, or you're going to go through every potential user for your app. So you do want to meter that and pay attention to it. You have to treat your users well. Like, we're at a point online where it's so easy to build up these applications, and like there's so many people doing it that if you don't build compelling experiences and stuff, and don't give people the attention that they think they deserve and that they do deserve, then they're just going to go to the next one. So you can't sacrifice growing in exchange for creating a poor user experience.